Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the debut record from the Halo Effect, Days of the Lost, out August 12th on Nuclear Blast. The album has 10 tracks, 44 minutes in length, and they are a Swedish melodic death metal band. You can call them a supergroup because that's exactly what they are, a who's who of the genre, of that Swedish sound, that Gothenburg sound that really got things started as far as this specific genre is concerned. And that's kind of where I want to start this review, because the album, the design, the structure, it feels very old school but with a more modern production value behind it. And I love this mix. When you look back at the albums that got this genre going, and these guys were involved with those records, sometimes the sound quality, sometimes the production was a little bit lacking. It didn't have the right atmosphere, it didn't have the right polish to it, it didn't have the right shine to it. It felt a little bit more grimy, and that took a little bit away from the melodic drive that the songs had or have. And in this album, they brought both worlds together, and they brought both worlds together in a very nice way, because the way the record is put together, it feels old school because of the design that it has, because of the sound that it carries. When you look at how this album moves from the first to the last song, it doesn't feel like a compilation, but it gives you the individual quality on a song-by-song basis. Every track on this record could be a single. Every track on this record is a single. But that doesn't mean that they have to be disconnected from one another. They still found the red line that allows you to navigate, that allows you to walk your way from the first all the way to the last song, allowing yourself to really enjoy not just the pit stops along the way, not just the tracks along the way, but the journey that you're on. Beautiful way of putting a record together. It's not easy to build an album like this, to give each song its own DNA, its own fingerprint, if you will, and still find a way of making them all work as one, or work towards the collective, which is the album as a whole. And then from the more modern perspective, you have that production behind it that allows you to better understand what the drums are doing, the melodies of the guitars, how the guitars are driven, the different ambiances that exist between the two guitar players, and those ambiances, what they create to the atmosphere of the songs, the vocals, how they interact with everything around it. The production of this album is really phenomenal. It really allows you to understand better what this genre was all about then and what that genre is all about now. An album that bridges the gap, an album that from a soundscape perspective, it's not about sounding like one band or sounding like another, because I know a lot of people watching this review are going to be asking me in the comment section, so is this an album that sounds like Old School In Flames, or does it sound a little bit more like Dark Tranquility? I think it sounds like both, but more importantly, it sounds like the birth of the genre. This album is not about taking one band or taking another and try to imitate or try to emulate or try to revamp something that was done in the past. It's rather an album that celebrates melodic death metal, celebrates that Gothenburg sound, and celebrates everything that they have done for the genre with the respective bands that they've played in. This album comes across with that sort of aroma, with that sort of DNA, with that sort of essence, that it's a celebration style record, allowing you to see exactly everything that has happened throughout the genre from those early beginnings to today, everything that they've worked on their individual bands, bringing it to the table, emphasizing it a little bit more, giving it a little bit more energy. And the soundscape of the album is exactly that Gothenburg sound that we love, that got melodic death metal on the map. It's going to be represented across 10 tracks with different variations from song to song, also representing the growth of the genre from the early days to today. So a nice sounding album, a well represented album, sound wise, from a design perspective, really well rounded. It's a very well put together record that doesn't have flaws, or at least doesn't have visible flaws. It's just strength after strength after strength. If you're a fan of the genre, if you're a fan of bands like In Flames and Dark Tranquility, obviously those two are the obvious choices to compare considering who's on this band. If you're a fan of those bands, if you're a fan of the genre, this record is going to hit home with this sound, almost feeling like a remastered album that perhaps had been released in early 90s, 92, 93, 94, around that time frame. So incredible sound, incredible presence, very compact, very unlinear in the way that it moves, because it gives you a sense of growth and it gives you a sense of fluidity from start to finish. I just love how it's put together. I love the design, I love the structure, I love the strength of the individual songs, and then obviously the strength of the collective that it's going to speak for itself. Now, about the elements within that sound, you obviously have to talk about the guitars, but I also want to talk about the drums, and I want to start off with the drums. The texture and the sound of the drums on this record is outstanding, something that it was not necessarily there in the beginning at the birth of melodic death metal, maybe due to the production behind it, but it wasn't really there. On this album, it is. You can feel the warmth, you can feel the texture, you can feel the substance that the drums add, not being overly heavy or overly powerful, not necessarily destroying everything around it or taking control of what you're going to get out of the soundscape of this record, but having a very positive impact, creating the foundation on every single song, allowing the tracks to have boosts of energy, to change momentums, to really create the shapes that are necessarily to have when you have an album that's going to be as dynamic, as fluid as this one is. But that warmth, that sense of substance, grounding, expanding, and moving, all of that is starting off with the drums and how they're processed and how they were approached throughout the entirety of this record. Now, as far as the guitars are concerned, I don't think anybody's expecting this album to not hit the mark as far as the guitar sound goes. The only thing you can talk about, perhaps from a slightly negative perspective, are the solos. There is a little bit of a lack of quality solos, and I think this album had room for it. There are some songs that could have a more explosive style solo, maybe something more old school, using the whammy bar in order to create expansion, in order to contract and expand, creating movement within the solos. There was definitely room on this record, and some songs could have really used it in order to become even bigger, even better than what they are. This is a more melodic, riff-driven style guitar sounding album. That's what you're going to get from the first song to the last. Considering who's involved as far as the guitars goes, it's not overly surprising. I think everybody's going to come into this album wanting cool melodies, cool riffs, cool hooks, songs that have this sense of just staying with you, being catchy, being hooky, with great playability from start to finish, and from that perspective, all of it is going to be there for you. But there was still room, like I said earlier, there was still room there for some solos that could complement the overall big picture slightly better, and because of that, they relied more often than not on using some melodies or on using some harmonies to replace where a solo would perhaps be in. It works in the context of this album, it works in the context of these songs, but after a while it becomes a little bit predictable, and I think you need to break that predictability and increase the movement, increase the impact that these songs could have from a guitar perspective. It's the only little slight negative nod that I have to give to this album, because everything else around it is extremely well done. Now, when you're listening to these songs on the individual basis, I don't think it's going to be as noticeable as when you sit down and you listen to the record from beginning to end. So the perception of the guitar sound or the solos on this album is going to have a different viewpoint depending on where you're coming from, listening to the album from start to finish or just digesting songs individually. Now, as far as vocals are concerned, what can I say? Mikkel Stein, one of my favorite vocalists, in my top 5 melodic death metal vocalists. This guy has an incredible voice. I've said this ad nauseum. He could read a grocery list and I would buy it. He just has a phenomenal delivery, a phenomenal tone, and he definitely adds quality to what these songs are all about. He adds quality to the construction of the tracks. He adds quality to the soundscape that the tracks have. Everything about these songs becomes a little bit more complete, becomes a little bit more visible once you add his vocal performance on it. The clean vocals, harsh vocals, the harmonies, how he moves you along, how he carries you along, and perhaps more important, how he tells the story that you're going to find within the lyrics. The lyrical content on this album really comes to life through his voice, through his tone. You could feel it, you can feel the emotion that it has, you can feel how he's singing it and how important those lyrics are to him. Absolutely incredible, nothing to say there. Phenomenal performance across every single track. He never disappoints, and this album is definitely no different. Now, overall, the Halo Effect, like I said earlier, a super group, a band made up of guys that know exactly what they're doing, that they wanted perhaps give a little bit of nod to their early beginnings, and then show you that the genre has evolved, but they're still part of that evolution, and this album is just that, another step in that evolution of what melodic death metal should sound like. This record is going to be one of the best, if not the best, melodic death metal album of the year. Definitely the best debut record without a shadow of a doubt. It's kind of hard to say debut record because these guys have released so many albums, but this is still their debut record, and it's a phenomenal album. Incredible sound, incredible essence, never gets old. You can listen to this album ad nauseum. Every song sounds so fresh, sounds so good, and in the listening experience, it's so mobile, it's so fluid with so many ups and downs. You get so many different looks within that genre that the album is always new. It feels like it's always new. It feels like you're listening to it for the first time every single time. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Conditional. Great melodic opening. It sets up the heaviness that follows. You really feel like you're coming all the way from the bottom, and then you're starting to climb all the way to the top. The guitars and drums pack the sound. They give power, they give drive, a heavy melodic drive that makes the song feel substantial. The vocals help guide the experience. They help you navigate the fog of that melody that the sound has. It sees a little bit more of a direct approach in the verses, and then a more contained melodic sound in the chorus. This allows the track to have memorable moments at every single turn. Next, you have Gateways. Now, this song sounds and feels completely different from everything else on the album, and I like that because it almost resets the experience that you're having as you're going from the first all the way to the last song. It sounds somber, it sounds more menacing, it has different attributes, it has some symphonic attributes. It almost feels like a Dimmu Borgir track if Dimmu Borgir was a melodic death metal band. That's the essence of this song. It has a nice way that it builds itself, it keeps moving, it has a nice atmosphere from start to finish. That somber nature that you see at the beginning, it stays there. It just changes the shades of darkness, or the shades of somberness as you progress through the song. Sometimes the song feels a little bit darker, sometimes a little bit less darker, but never losing that darkness all around. It has also some explosive moments, specifically in the chorus, making it more memorable, making it more noticeable. It sounds big, it sounds like it has movement. The riff that transitions from the verses to the chorus, delicious. That's the best way to describe that transition when you go from one to the other. That guitar, the way it enters into the song and the way that guides you through it, it's just outstanding. It just sounds so good. It feels so good. It's one of those that you're always waiting for it. It's one of those interesting elements that perhaps doesn't have a massive impact when you look at the overall design, but it does have a great impact in the playability of the track and how it moves the listener around. Last but not least, A Truth Worth Lying For, heavy and steady. This is a track that just feels heavy from the beginning. It still moves, it still morphs, but it keeps that melodic heavy backdrop as the main consistent element from start to finish. The chorus breaks a little bit through that. The chorus allows it to be a little bit more noticeable. The clean vocals and then the backing vocals behind those clean vocals really help define the shape of that chorus and how you process it and how you listen to it and then how you digest the overall track. It defines the chorus, it defines the song. It breaks the track into two, if you will. There has different momentums, there are different experiences, but that heaviness, that sense of melodic heaviness is really consistent throughout. It's just that how it comes across makes you feel slightly different towards the track, depending on you are. Two sides of the same coin, if you will. This is it, the Halo Effect, Days of the Lost, out August 12th on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.